All right, let's get into one of military history's greatest puzzles. We're talking about a secret weapon that helped an empire dominate the seas. And then, poof, it just vanished.
So here's the central puzzle, right? You've got the Roman Republic. On land, they're absolute titans. Their legions are legendary, unstoppable. But on the water? Total rookies. So how on earth did they go from that to challenging Carthage, the undisputed masters of the sea?
Well, they did it with this, an absolutely ingenious and kind of terrifying device. The Romans called it the Corvus. Now that's Latin for crow or raven, and believe me, once you see how it works, that name makes perfect sense.
Okay, so let's really dig into what this thing was. What was the problem it was designed to fix? This is classic Rome, you know? A perfect blend of smart engineering and just brute force.
So picture this. It's the First Punic War. Rome has the best soldiers on the planet, bar none. But Carthage, they own the Mediterranean. And for Rome to actually win this war, they have to figure out how to fight on the water. They have to beat the best in the world at their own game. And that seems like an impossible task.
And this was their answer, the Corvus. So what is it? At its core, it's a giant boarding ramp they stuck on the front of their ships. And the name, the Crow? Well, that comes from this huge, nasty, beak-shaped spike on the bottom. The idea was to just slam it down and have it bite right into the enemy's deck.
And we actually have a pretty good idea of what it looked like thanks to the historian Polybius. He gives us the specs. We're talking about a bridge that's almost 36 feet long. It was about 4 feet wide so soldiers could run across it, and it even had these little protective railings. The whole thing was held up by a pole and a pulley system just waiting to be dropped.
And here's the absolute genius of it. The Romans knew. They just knew they couldn't win a normal sea battle. They weren't good enough at ramming or maneuvering, so the Corvus was designed to just cheat, to change the rules of the game completely. You get close, you slam that bridge down, and bam! It's not a sea battle anymore. It's a land battle, right on the enemy's ship. And on land, nobody beats Roman legionaries.
Okay, so the idea is brilliant. It's a game changer on paper, but did it actually work? Let's find out how this thing really performed when the fighting started.
All right, its first big moment comes in 260 BCE, the Battle of Mylae. You have this brand new Roman fleet, with these weird-looking bridges on their bows, and they're sailing out to face the Carthaginian navy, who are super experienced, super confident. They probably think this is going to be easy.
The result? It was an absolute bombshell. The Carthaginians just sailed right into the trap. The bridges dropped, the legionaries swarmed over, and Carthage lost 50 ships. I mean 50! Rome, the underdog, the newbie on the seas, had just pulled off a massive naval victory.
And you can imagine the psychological effect. Polybius tells us that after Mylae, the Carthaginian sailors were genuinely scared to get close to Roman ships. So the Corvus wasn't just a piece of hardware. It became a weapon of terror.
Fast forward 4 years, the stakes get even higher. We're at the Battle of Ecnomus, and this is one of the biggest naval battles in the history of the world. The Romans are trying to invade Africa, Carthage's home turf, and Carthage throws everything they have to stop them.
And wow, the outcome was just staggering. Look at these numbers. Carthage loses over 30 ships sunk and 64 captured. Those captured ships, you can bet the Corvus had something to do with that. And Rome, they lost 24 ships, but not a single one was captured. It was a crushing victory. The path to Africa was now wide open.
So, okay, you've got this incredible game-changing weapon. It's just handed you 2 of the biggest naval wins in your history. The logical thing to do is build more of them, right? Use them all the time? Well, this is where the story gets really, really weird.
Because after that massive win at Ignemus, the Corvus basically disappears. It just vanishes from all our historical sources. Which leads to the big question, why? Why on earth would you just ditch a weapon that seems to be winning you the war?
Yeah, look at this timeline. It really spells it out. You have this spectacular debut in 260, another massive victory in 256, and then silence, nothing. When Rome wins the war's final decisive sea battle in 241, there's no mention of the Corvus. And way later, you see that they've come up with a totally different device called the Harpax. So the mystery just gets deeper and deeper.
Okay, so this forces us to ask some tough questions. Was the Corvus really the superweapon we've been led to believe? Or is the story a little more complicated? This is where we get into the modern controversy.
So on one hand, you have the classical take, right? The one from Polybius. He basically says the Corvus was the reason Rome won, a total game changer. But then you have modern historians, like Chris Steinbe, who are a bit more skeptical. They argue it was just a limited tool. I mean, they point out that Rome was winning other, smaller sea battles even without the Corvus. So maybe it was just one tool in a toolbox that was getting bigger and better all the time.
So, okay, what was its fatal flaw? The most popular theory for years has been that it was just too dangerous. You've got this big, heavy thing mounted high up on a ship. It seems like it would make the whole vessel really unstable, right? Especially in a storm. But even that's up for debate. There's a study by Professor Bonebacher that actually estimates its weight and concludes that it probably wouldn't have been enough to seriously upset the stability of a big Roman warship.
So if it wasn't some kind of stability death trap, what gives? Well, the real answer is probably all of the above. It's a mix of things. For one, Roman sailors just got better. They didn't need the crutch anymore. Their enemies probably figured out ways to deal with it too. And yeah, in rough seas, it was totally useless. So when you put it all together, it looks like it was just a tool that had served its purpose. And that really brings us to the verdict here. The Corvus wasn't a permanent superweapon. It was more like a brilliant temporary fix. Think of it like a set of training wheels for the Roman Navy. It was the crucial stepping stone they needed to learn how to fight at sea. It was the bridge, both literally and figuratively, that took them from being novices to being masters of the waves. It really makes you think, doesn't it? The story of the Corvus is this great reminder that the most important inventions aren't always the ones that stick around forever. Sometimes it's about the thing that solves a huge problem right now. And that makes you wonder, what other so-called superweapons from history are more legend than reality? What else has a more complicated story just waiting to be told?